Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. When you think 90s 16-bit fighting games, I'm sure that games such as Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct come to mind. With the growing popularity of well-developed fighting games came the rush to be the next big thing. Today we're taking a look at Sega's now rather forgotten attempt to get in on the action, as we take a look back at Eternal Champions for the Sega Mega Drive and Sega Genesis. To give some context, Street Fighter 2 was all the craze in the arcades by the early 90s, and by 1992 Mortal Kombat had demonstrated that violence levels could be upped a notch to tap into the excitement of video game bloodsport. With these two coin-guzzling titles dominating the arcade, it wasn't long before the home releases began to generate the same buzz. During this 16-bit period, the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis were locked in a battle against the Super Nintendo. For what it's worth, my view is that Midway's Mortal Kombat worked better on the 16-bit Sega platforms, whilst Capcom's Street Fighter series undoubtedly played much better on the Super Nintendo console. One issue here was that Midway and Capcom were the developers of these games. These studios were the creative force behind the games. Sega and Nintendo were just the last leg of the journey. They were the publishers. It was around this time that alarm bells rang at both Sega and Nintendo HQ. What if the rival were to develop a killer application in-house? The result could have a significant impact on the console war. In short, that's almost exactly what happened. By 1994, developer Rare had developed Killer Instinct for the Nintendo systems. Due to Rare's exclusivity agreements with Nintendo, it was as good as an in-house solution. Killer Instinct went on to innovate with pre-rendered sprites, a combo system, accompanying Killer Beat's soundtrack, and carved out its own place in the market. A year prior to this, Sega had shown their hand in the game that we're looking at today, Eternal Champions. If you're a long-term Sega collector, you'll know all about it, but for many, Eternal Champions will just be a footnote in history. The game does have a rather inane backstory. Each fighter must compete in a championship in the hopes of being resurrected by the Eternal Champion. The fighters themselves come from a variety of eras in time. You'll be able to choose from 9 unique characters ranging from film noir detectives, sea monsters, assassins and Blade. I have to say that despite wide criticism of the lineup from the internet, I personally believe that Sega did at least put some effort in here. No palette swap characters and a genuine attempt to make a varied cast. If I were to be very cynical though, this is very much the setup of another game called Time Killers on the Sega Genesis. However, when it comes to 90s fighters, there's only ever a limited number of ideas. At least this didn't turn into a Rise of the Robots situation. Graphically, I'm in two minds about Eternal Champions. The character sprites are very well drawn and have a distinctively chunky feel to them. The backgrounds are also well detailed and do feature animation. Technically, the graphics work well and do give the game a distinct aesthetic. I have to say that I do prefer other styles such as the cartoon feel of Street Fighter, or more detailed King of Fighters style, each to his own though. The sound of Eternal Champions is very much a low point. It's generic to the point that the background music actually makes the game seem much duller than it really is. A few more upbeat tunes would have gone a long way to sorting this out. Taking its lead from Mortal Kombat, Eternal Champions does include Fatalities. These are stage specific, and the opponent has to be standing in a precise position at the time of the kill. The issue I have here is that the fatalities and finishing moves need an impact to be worthwhile. In Mortal Kombat, it's a decisive bloody uppercut, leading to an impalement or decapitation. It's memorable and worth the effort.
Finish him.
In Eternal Champions, the fatalities feel like a whispered message. They just don't have any impact at all. It's possible that Sega didn't want to court too much controversy with a self-developed game featuring explicit violence, but I just can't help feeling that this was a missed opportunity. During the 16-bit era, Sega had already demonstrated that they were not afraid to publish titles of a much more violent nature. The only interpretation here is that Sega wanted to make a game that was more universally accepted and appealing to all age groups. Again, this just doesn't work though from a branding perspective. Older gamers will move on to Mortal Kombat 2, and younger gamers will feel as if their games are being dumbed down. All in all, Eternal Champions just doesn't seem to know quite who its audience is. So the target audience may be a little ill-defined, but how does the game play? I've been back and forth on this, and I'm still yet to come to a definitive answer. The game utilises Sega's 6-button controller, which is perfect for fighting games. High and low punches and kicks of various strength are easy to execute. The special moves take a bit of practice, but overall there's nothing to dislike about the control method itself. Attacking and defending is only one half of the equation though. It's the computer opponent that really throws Eternal Champions into a very special place. If asked today, I can still win perfect rounds in the original Street Fighter 2 and also the 16-bit Mortal Kombat series. Why? Well, the games are somewhat predictable. Once you play for a while, you realise that it's very much a high-stakes game of rock, paper, scissors. After a while, you instinctively know what the computer will do. In Mortal Kombat, it's a case of when the opponent goes high, then uppercut. If standing start, then jump kick. You can practically read the code in the front end. It's not skill I'm using, it's just a case of learning the pre-programmed behaviour routines. You can always trust a coder to suck the fun out of a game. Eternal Champions though, it's a tough one to crack the exploits. In essence, what I don't like is the rather cheap programming tactics. In a nutshell, the opponents are extremely risk averse. This inevitably makes them seem more skillful than they actually should be. Take this exchange for example. You can land in the region of a 40-hit manual combo before you are either countered or break through the defence. This is incredibly unusual in a fighting game. Most fighting games will by default add in a small subroutine to make the outcome either way, rather than letting a player repeat a move until it works. This is just one example, but all round Eternal Champions has some very quirky opponent behaviours. It's difficult to convey in the video, but just give this one a try and you'll see how the behaviour affects the gameplay. The opposite effect is true if you're in defence. The opponent can launch some very sophisticated combo chains and special moves. Just defending won't be enough, you'll need to know the correct counter move to survive. Overall, Eternal Champions does have an in-depth fighting system, just don't expect to feel comfortable with it straight away. To help, the game does provide a practice mode, as well as a battle room option. This allows you to go and configure additional traps and hazards. It's a nice little feature and does help pad out the gameplay experience with some additional variety. If you're looking to collect this one on the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, you will find a few variants. Most will come in the standard black plastic box with manual and standard cartridge. There are others with limited edition poster and various extra bits of paperwork, but really nothing to go out of your way to collect. In the UK, you can pick up a complete edition anywhere from £2 to £8 British. For the US Genesis audience, you should be looking around the $5 mark. There is a technically superior Sega CD version of this game. A US NTSC edition will run you around the $10 to $20 mark, whereas a UK PAL edition can go for anywhere up to £40 British. So, is Eternal Champions worth collecting? Well, if you're a Sega collector, it's a yes. If nothing else, it's the novelty for Sega to step out and design their own 16-bit fighter. You're certainly not going to be converted from the mainstream fighting games, but I'll wager that Eternal Champions will give you a challenge that you weren't quite expecting. You will have to sink some time into this title to get the best from it. This is actually quite refreshing on one hand, but does push the game towards a very niche circle of gamers. As much as I admire Sega, I have to say that Eternal Champions probably isn't going to thrill you. There's sparks of greatness in the game, but unfortunately the end result is very much a second tier fighter. It's competent, reasonably priced, and gets the job done. somehow it just didn't resonate with gamers of the time. For those that know me, I'm a very long-term Sega collector. However, on this occasion, I feel that they missed the mark a little. Eternal Champions. It's not bad, it's not great, it's going to be one of those games that's forgotten and buried under the standout fighters of the 16-bit era. If you do happen to have the opportunity to pick this one up though, it's still worth a second look for the curious Sega fan. Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!